Well, hello everyone. This will be a mercifully short video. And one of the reasons is that you see that there's a point there, topic sent out in a separate document. I've actually sent you a written document to go over the topics for the final paper in business ethics. It's not too complicated. You can choose to write on one of the selections for the midterm that you did not take. In other words, what you did not write on for the midterm, because there were three options. You could use one of those other two. Since the midterm, those are topics that you could write on. We've done Deepwater Horizon. We've talked about big pharma, particularly Purdue Pharmacy, whistleblowers, and then we've had our student presentations for extra credit. So the written document that I send out pretty much outlines those selections and how you could write on them. The purpose of this paper is to kind of go into the nuts and bolts of the construction. So I'm going to start, though, with the discussion of the deal, which was my first point up there. There's a time in this course when you're supposed to submit the first page of your term paper, let me just say that a little differently. You will need to submit the first page of your term paper, and I do that for kind of obvious reasons. I don't want you to wait to the last minute to get a start on this. So it's a homework assignment. You will be reading that paper in the live chat or the on-ground class, whichever one that you have. This particular video is being recorded during the COVID-19 fiasco, but what I'm saying applies to future courses as well. So let's go back to that. The first page of your term paper is submitted. However, you can use that same slot. Now remember that you have to use this slot to submit a completed paper. In other words, it's a 5 to 6 page final term paper, and you've not just done the first page, but you've completed your paper for review. So it's a good deal because it's not going to be graded. It's a homework assignment. You need to submit it, but it's not the final term paper grade. Now, if you do that, you want to really have pushed that as far as you can. In other words, you don't want to just do some rough outline and see what the professor provides as feedback. That won't help much. You really need to have worked on it and basically written a paper that you would have submitted for a grade as the final paper. That's where I can actually help you. Because what will happen is, it's submitted to the first page of the term paper. You submit the one page, which is the requirement, or you can submit your completed paper in that same box. Now, when we read the first page of the term paper in class, you need to be there. And you're not going to read your whole paper. Just read the first page. What will happen is the day after the class, I will get back to you. I will send you email. And in that email, I will give you some options. Usually how I do that is the first option is, as written, I would give this paper the following grade, the following points. And then I will summarize the points that you have to date and then say, based on these points that you've earned, including this, draft of your final paper, this would be your letter grade. That would be like the first option. Then I'm going to give you option 2. I'll say, well, if you want to do a rewrite and submit for a higher grade, then here's some feedback. In other words, I'll kind of give you some constructive criticism so that you could improve that paper, and then you resubmit it as the final paper, and that'll be for a grade. Okay, and of course, usually people do, take the feedback and can move that whatever points I said it was worth as written to a higher level. Okay, so that should be clear. I'll also go over this sometime. Well, I will go over this in class, have gone over it, and just want to make sure it's clear because there's some real elements that have to be followed. You have to submit that completed rough draft in the Turnitin.com in your course shell when it's due. You have to show up and read that first page, and then you fulfilled all the elements, and you'll get the email the following day with your options. Okay, so let's just go back a little bit over the basic elements of a position paper. Now you already had a developmental essay for the midterm. There's there's information, written information, integrating Rubik in your course shell. But let's just go through the numbers again. Your thesis is your point of view, and it's an I paper in that sense. I am going to advocate that the Deepwater Horizon case, yada, 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 and I'm going to use Kant's deontology to support my thesis at, your paper, your thesis, or however you want to word that, in terms of integrating a moral theory into the first sentences of your essay. Okay. Now, most of the time, students do well with this, and I mentioned this when I talk about the midterm in class. They get it. Okay, it's an I paper. I've got to decide which topic to use. I've got to have a point of view. I need to express, and then I've got to integrate a moral theory, and I need to do that right away because Professor Thiel says, he doesn't want this to be a literary masterpiece where you, talk about the existential crisis that got you to take this course and the weather conditions when you wrote your paper, all those wonderful things that sometimes make for fun reading. But this is a lean, mean writing machine. That's why the paper doesn't have a long length, because every sentence advances your point of view. Okay. Now, here's what often happens. That's the last time I hear much about the moral theory until maybe the very last paragraph. And that. Let me just say why that doesn't work. The purpose of this course, taking this course as a philosophy course, and in particular because of the focus and efforts that we put in to try to get a good handle on the three basic moral theories. These aren't ones I've manufactured. These are the three basic moral theories in Western philosophy that have been around for a long time. Aristotle's a couple thousand years old. It was Kant and Bentham's utilitarianism, and since the Enlightenment, a couple hundred years, and they've survived the test of time. They are the ones that you would read about if you took this a course in ethics or a philosophy, a course in moral philosophy, just about anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. So I want to see that you've kind of got it, that you understand these moral theories and how they work where the rubber hits the road. I mean, in other words, how you can apply them, because theories are one thing, application is another, and sometimes a course like this one is called applied ethics, where you apply the moral theory to real life situations. So you don't want to lose sight of that theory and that's defending your thesis. You want to continue to thread it into the fabric of your paper. Okay. Then the last thing is this rebuttal component. It's sometimes that one doesn't quite get the attention it needs. In other words, for any thesis that you would have, there could be the antithesis. It looks like antithesis, but it's antithesis. And what it is something that would count against what you're arguing or are advocating. And you want to be able to not just know what that is or just state what that is, but you need to rebut it. You need to say, well, some might say that using Kant in a situation like this is problematic because, as we know, Kant's negative duties are perfect and inflexible and, whatever, because that is a problem in Kant's theory. And if you're using Kant, you have to have some recognition of that, and then you just have can say why that's not a stumbling block for the theory supporting your thesis. It could also be that the rebuttal component might not be related necessarily to the moral theory you use, but if you're saying something, let's say you write on a student presentation for extra credit, which actually tried to showcase companies that were morally decent. A rebuttal component, even though this particular institution or company seems to be morally decent, they have endured certain scandals. Some might say that praise is misplaced. that's a kind of counter argument. You may be able to swat that down fairly easy if the preponderance of the activities of that company were decent. But be careful not to just choose the straw man type of an argument, something that is so easily defeated. In other words, in terms of a rebuttal component, a counter argument that really doesn't amount to much. It's kind of a straw man. Try to tackle whatever might be a real serious counter argument to your thesis, the flesh and blood counter argument, and work on that one. Now, once again, I give a lot of points to a paper where people got their hands dirty a little bit. In other words, I'm not looking for some polished, thing that you somehow, piece together from internet research. Although you don't want to plagiarize anything, but and you don't need to make footnotes and references. You can make the reference right in the paper, and as so and so stated, if you do any outside research. You really don't need to be doing internet research for this paper because we've covered the topics. If it's a whistleblower thing, we know the basic biographical sketch. Now it's time to put a moral theory to work, and that's not something that you just do random searches on the internet to construct. So I'm looking for papers that really show that, really indicate that you've grasp the significance of the moral theory and how to apply it in a real life situation. I guess I'll leave it at that. The big one at the very bottom, that's the tough one, isn't it? Time management. It's you got to manage your time in this. I'm looking at the clock as this video can go 15 minutes and shuts down. You need to get something down, and don't get a writer's block thing going like, oh gosh, I haven't started that paper because I really don't know how it's going to go, and start to write it. I've had students come to me and say, I don't know what to do. I can't, I'm thinking about this. And so I said, well, explain to me what you're thinking about in terms of a thesis and what you're going to write on. And then they'll tell me, and I was like, well, that sounds pretty good. And then what would be a counter argument? And then they would tell me, and how would you answer that? And then they would tell, well, you got it. It's in your mind. Start putting it on paper. Now that doesn't mean that first splash of 4 to 5 pages is going to be your final submission. Can't be. I couldn't do that. I would get it down. I would get something on paper, and then I would start to, craft it. That might mean that you don't look at it for a day, and then you think about it. You say, okay, now I'm going to read this again. Like I don't even know who wrote this. It's not my little baby, just some paper I picked up. And then you do some self-criticism. Some critical analysis, and you massage it, and you get it to where it's really what you want to turn in. And it's a process. And again, if it's a process, it takes time. A person who's a good craftsperson who crafts things doesn't rush their projects. So I know it's hard. It sounds like, it's easy for you to say, but I've got a job and this going on and that going on, and believe me, I get it. I would be very. I don't think anyone was just devoting their entire existence to this class. That wouldn't be right. Well, if you were independently wealthy, you just had time on your hands, I guess. But we're not. We're busy. We've got all things going on. But time management is setting aside time, managing time, so that you can not be stuck at the last minute trying to write a final paper for this class, which is not going to really be your best work. Okay? Now, you're smart folks. I'm not going to belabor this. I'm running out of time. But I hope this helps a bit. And then again, I've given you a written document that'll show you what the topics are, explicitly, and then give you some hints in that paper as well. All right, folks. Well, thanks for taking the time to watch this. I wish everyone well. Take care.